All right, I think we're live.
Yep, looks right.
So you want to give an introduction to yourself and Twin Cities Apologetics?
Yeah, that sounds good. First, I think it would be good to explain. I have video going here, and Tom was unfortunately not able to set up video for today. So we'll just have this kind of going, this video here. And we figured it was better to have some video rather than not. That's just so viewers are aware of that. So my name is Jeremy Lynn. I live in Golden Valley, Minnesota, close to Minneapolis. I work as an accountant at a law firm in downtown Minneapolis. I also go to Bethel Seminary, which is a very well-known university and also seminary around this area. And I'm going for the Christian Thought graduate program there. And that's really out of a passion for digging into these deep topics and wanting to continue further in that kind of discussion. And then the last thing is I lead a group called Twin Cities Apologetics in the cities here. And this is a group that has a focus on equipping Christians to address some of the skeptical ideas that are in the culture around them. So those kind of things consist of meetings that happen every other week. On Wednesdays, we meet in Minnetonka and have a discussion about a curriculum that we're going through on various topics. And then sometimes we have separate events happening in between our sessions or our curriculums. We also are on Facebook and Instagram, posting a lot of content on there. So if you're interested, you can definitely check out one of those avenues. Just search up Twin Cities Apologetics. And then
I'll put the links in the description.
Yeah, it sounds great. And we also have a future website coming, the TwinCitiesApologetics.com, still in the works. But yeah, we have a lot of things planned. This is a group that has existed just this year, back in January. So we're new, but a lot of exciting things have happened, and we look forward to a lot that's coming up too.
All right, great. For my introduction, I am an atheist. And by which I mean I don't believe there is any evidence or argument that indicate the existence of a God at all. And I'm curious to know, do you believe there is such evidence? And if so, what do you believe it to be? And then I'll tell you why I don't think it works. And I'd just like to hear your thoughts on my position.
Okay, that sounds good. So my understanding of this conversation was that it was related to the resurrection of Jesus and whether Jesus rose from the dead or not. I happen to think that there is a good amount of evidence supporting that claim. And if that is true, that does a lot to saying that Christianity is true. So I'll start there and see just where we can go from that point. Does that sound good?
Sure.
Okay. So when it comes to the resurrection of Jesus, something that we can look at is certain events that people have claimed to have happened in the past. And once we establish these historical events, events that actually happened based on eyewitness testimony, then we can start asking, okay, what explanation for these events best fits the data? So some of those events include Jesus' life that he lived, that he did wondrous kind of extraordinary types of things or acts. And that's well attested in not only the Gospels, but also extra biblical text, people writing about Jesus and talking about how he's done these basically wondrous works. There's also his death by Roman crucifixion, which is another well attested event in history. And then we have these claims of appearances of Jesus from his closest followers. And this is something attested in most of the Gospels and also in an early creed, as shown in the letter of the Apostle Paul, 1 Corinthians. In 1 Corinthians 15, there's this creed where Paul gives this formula of Jesus dying and rising from the dead, and then people seeing him after his death. Then there's a more specific case, the conversion of Saul, who was a skeptic to Christianity, and he claimed to have a experience of Jesus, and through that experience converted over to belief that Jesus rose from the dead, or basically converted to Christianity. And there's a question of why did that happen? What led him to make that kind of decision, going from a completely skeptical position to one of belief in this event? Then finally, we have data that's at least some of the closest followers of Jesus died, specifically for what they believed. And this is something Christians often say, like all the apostles died, or 11 of the 12, something like that. And we don't necessarily have evidence or data to support all of the apostles dying in that sense, but we do at least have some. So when we look at all these events in history, we can ask what explanation best fits them. And I would say, based on that evidence and looking at the various explanations for these events, that the standard explanation that Jesus did actually rise from the dead best fits that data. So this is basically an inference to the best explanation, looking at historical data and asking, okay, what is reasonable to believe in light of these things that have happened?
All right, cool. Well, let me tell you my position on the historicity.
Yeah,
So
perfect.
if I told you I saw a living, breathing dog, you should believe me. But if I told you I saw a living, breathing unicorn, you probably shouldn't believe me. The difference between these two claims is that dogs have an implicit empirical basis, whereas unicorns don't. Meaning there are things that we can verify with our sense experience right now in the present about dogs, like their genetic makeup, their chemical composition, their bone structure, what they're allergic to, all this kind of stuff, which doesn't exist for unicorns. So from my perspective, in order to justify an empirical claim about the world that like dogs exist or that unicorns exist and I happened to see one, you need to have empirical evidence of that thing happening. And the conceptual evidence of my testimony, I saw a dog, isn't sufficient to justify claims about things that don't already have an empirical basis, which means miracles, magic, mythical creatures, the paranormal, the supernatural, UFOs. No amount of testimony, whether it's historical testimony or eyewitness testimony, is reasonable to believe that those things actually exist. It's far more reasonable to believe they are delusions or misconceptions, misinterpretations, until such time as an empirical basis is presented for those things. And I would say this also applies to historical I would say this also applies to historical claims. So I don't think that any amount of historical testimony or eyewitness testimony is sufficient to believe that the miracle of Jesus' resurrection happened at all until you can actually empirically verify miracles happen.
Okay. Yeah, I think that argument that you present has a lot of truth to it and is a very helpful and powerful thing to think through. And I agree with you that using the example of a dog and a dragon, if someone said, "Hey, I saw a unicorn. If I saw this unicorn down the street, there would be less reason to believe him or her, and you may want to get some further background information about what happened or what that person saw, as opposed to a dog." Now, there may be some background information applicable to a dog that helps you analyze that whole scenario. Like someone could say, "Hey, I saw this dog. I just flew up in space and saw this dog up there." So it's not like someone saying that they saw a dog automatically makes that claim true. We need some more background information. And that's the same with the unicorn. We're just less likely to believe upon initial look that someone made that correct claim about the unicorn as opposed to a dog. So I agree with you on that point. Or am I representing your view correctly in that sense?
I think so, but how does that relate to your position?
Sure. So that was more of a general comment towards your scenario and just saying that we need to look at further context beyond the pure, as you say, internal empirical evidence for something that someone sees.
Oh, sure. This is just a prima facie. The first thing we start when assessing a claim is, does this claim have empirical evidence or not? So yeah, there's definitely more criteria for sure.
Yeah, thanks. So when it comes to the things that I said earlier, or when I started out here, about these events of Jesus' life, those specific events have some sort of empirical basis in themselves, or has that, as you say, implicit empirical basis. So someone living, for example, it's definitely possible that someone can live. It's possible that someone can die via Roman crucifixion. There's records of people enduring that kind of death and archaeological evidence supporting that as well. You have people who saw this person, Jesus, after his death. And again, just that fact of like seeing someone has an empirical basis, that you can see someone living. And then people dying, again, that can actually happen. So we do have this implicit empirical data behind those specific events. So if we establish those events, then we can ask what explanation fits them. Now, if someone didn't see the resurrection happen, like there was an eyewitness testimony of, hey, I saw this person rise up from the dead. So that's not what I'm saying here, that someone saw that and that proves that that happened. But I'm looking at these conceptual claims that these different events happen that have an implicit empirical basis, and asking, okay, what best fits those things? And if you don't think that the resurrection is a proper explanation for those events, then I would ask, what is a natural explanation that could explain those things happening?
Okay, so we have an implicit empirical basis for people living and people dying and empty tombs and people. We know of certain psychological conditions where people see loved ones after they have died as illusions and delusions. We have lots of empirical evidence of all of that. We have none for miracles, just like we have none for unicorns. So it isn't reasonable to say that because we have implicit empirical evidence of people seeing things, that those things exist or that those things happened. So exactly like with the unicorns, we have lots of implicit empirical evidence of people seeing things. Does that mean that the things they see are real? No, you still need implicit empirical evidence of the things that they see, independent of the fact that they saw them. So I wouldn't accept the life of Jesus, the death of Jesus, the empty tomb as evidence of a resurrection. You still need to provide evidence, empirical evidence, that resurrections and miracles can happen.
Okay, so that might be a good thing to turn to now. Is there evidence that miracles can occur, or that they're even possible? And this can, get to discussion on David Hume and his claims and
I'll
things like
grant
that.
miracles are possible. I'll grant that. We can start with there.
Okay, so what do you mean by miracles are possible?
I just won't say anything is impossible at all because I just don't know how I could ever justify that claim. So I just say everything's possible from the offset.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you mean by miracles?
Yeah, that's a good question. Miracles is one of those terms that that can cause different descriptions, or people have different definitions for them. So miracles, I'm still working out the definition myself, or like establishing a set definition. But I would say a lot of it involves the typical laws of nature that we know. Somehow they're broken into, or somehow they're altered by some supernatural force. And not only that, but there is some, let's say, spiritual significance behind those things happening. So when it comes to miracles, the way I assess that and ask, did a miracle actually happen in this circumstance, is asking, is an event highly improbable, like astronomically unlikely? And it really doesn't seem like a natural explanation could fit what happened. And then I ask, is there some sort of significance on the spiritual level for what happened? Some indication that there's a reason behind this. So a miracle for me would involve those things, of that extreme unlikelihood along with the significance behind it.
So would 2,000 years ago, when we didn't understand astronomy and someone saw an eclipse, would that qualify as a miracle based on your definition?
Based on my definition, based on our current understanding of natural laws, that would not be a miracle.
But 2,000 years ago, before we knew about the laws of nature, if we saw an eclipse, this is an incredibly improbable thing that has significance to the people who are seeing it. So it seems like it would fit your definition of miracle if we didn't understand nature.
It would potentially, someone could see that as a miracle at that time. I will say that.
Okay, so how do you tell the difference between a supernatural event that breaks the laws of nature in some way versus just some unknown natural law?
That is a hard question to answer, and one reason why the miracle topic is a difficult one to discern. Again, I gave my criteria for looking at a miracle and asking, did a miracle happen in the circumstance? That the unlikelihood and then spiritual significance. It's probably a case-by-case basis that you need to look at these things and ask, okay, is there a natural explanation that can fit this based on our current understanding of natural laws? Now, maybe in the future, there will be some sort of thing that's discovered of how nature works and stuff, which can tell us, oh, that thing before, that can be explained in this like natural way. But we can only go off of our current understanding. So, I mean, there's always the potential for everything that happens that seems unlikely to be explained through a specific natural thing. There is that potential, but we need to look at the present and what's happening in going off of our current understanding.
But if your definition of a miracle is that it is some kind of violation of natural law, then don't you have to show that it wasn't some unnatural law to show it was actually a miracle?
So I want to make sure I'm understanding your question correctly. So you're asking, based on my definition of miracle, I need to prove essentially or show that a natural law was violated in some way. Is that correct?
Well, I think so. Am I understanding your definition correct? Because I believe you said that for something to be a miracle, it has to be some kind of violation or intrusion upon the natural laws by some supernatural force. Was that what you said?
Yeah, and I think that would be again an inference to the best explanation. I wouldn't necessarily try to prove, oh, this specific natural law was broken and then these atoms formed in this way to create this miracle. I wouldn't be able to show that. That's you could say beyond human capabilities in a lot of circumstances. But again, I look at the data that's there and ask, what is the best explanation that I can determine based on what's happened? And that was the same for the early followers of Jesus. They saw these things happen. They saw Jesus die. They grieved over that. They thought, well, this whole thing that we have going, it's done. It's over. But then they saw these actual in real life experiences of Jesus. And they had asked themselves, how do we explain this? What do we do about this? Well, according to the Gospels, Jesus explained a lot of what was happening and why things happened the way they did, and also showed signs that he was actually alive to them. But the disciples had that process. They had events that happened, and they had asked themselves, what is the best explanation for all these things that have happened? And I would incorporate a similar type of method in assessing events that have happened and asking, did a miracle potentially happen here? Now, with my skeptical mindset, I may be prone to not accept that kind of claim easily, that a miracle happened, but I can at least ask the question if there's a possibility that it did.
So how is that different from people who see unidentified flying objects in the sky and say, well, how do I best explain this? Aliens. Or someone who sees lightning 2,000 years ago and says, well, how do I best explain this? Zeus. Why does coming up with or imagining explanations, why is that reasonable method to approaching how to understand something?
Can you explain what you mean by imagining? Because like Like that term sounds
Sure.
like someone's basically just making up things.
Sure. From my perspective, if it doesn't have an empirical basis, then it's essentially something we are imagining necessarily, because those are kind of the two categories that I'm aware of. Either it's something in our heads or it's something that exists in the world that we can empirically verify. So if it doesn't have an empirical basis, then from my perspective, it just seems like that's just something someone imagined as an explanation. So why does our imagination of an explanation mean that that's some kind of a plausible explanation that we should accept?
Right. So you're saying that if something isn't empirical, it's by necessity conceptual and essentially imaginary because it's in our heads and not out in the real world. So just for my sake, maybe for further understanding, also for people watching, can you explain your definition of empirical, just so we have an understanding of what makes something empirical?
Verifiable by sense experience.
Verifiable by experience.
Yeah, verifiable by sense experience. Yeah.
Okay. Um, so these people, like, let's say a miracle. So someone sees this person, let's say, the common example, like, has a leg a certain length, and then sees in a few days, like a day later, let's say that their leg has increase in length. Like those are empirical things that someone can see and observe. So those things are like empirical in themselves.
When I said verifiable by sense experience, not just the ability to experience something with senses, but to verify it with experience. So you have to be able to make like a testable prediction that I can then go test and verify that your experience was accurate. So a little more detailed than just being able to experience it.
Okay, so you're saying that we need basically this verifiable data to show that something's true. Is that right?
To show it wasn't just something a part of our imagination, a delusion, a misconception, misunderstanding, to show it was actually a part of the world in some sense, when it needs to be verifiable.
Okay, so just so I can understand this as well, you say that something needs to be empirical in order to have a situation where something we claim is verifiable. But that claim that we need something to be empirical in order to verify our claims doesn't have an empirical basis behind it. It's in our heads. It's something
right.
just that we understand about the world. So how do you know that assertion that you make is true?
It's a conceptual principle. Like logic isn't something we can verify. We can't verify that A equals A, but it's a conceptual principle. It's only the claims about the external world need evidence from the external world. So empirical claims require empirical evidence, but conceptual claims require conceptual evidence, meaning things like logic and math and these conceptual principles of verifiability only require conceptual evidence that they're like logically consistent. They don't actually require empirical evidence. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does. I have a bit of a sense that there's non-openness to various categories of things happening. So you can have, say, a conceptual claim like say, like imagining something in your head, let's say, and it can have empirical data behind it. So like I'm just a little unclear about like the.
Can you explain a little bit more?
Yeah. I'm trying to think of an example here, and I'll just go back to the resurrection since that's what you're talking about, and that will like make things a little more direct to me in terms of what we're talking about. So, like these things that, let's say something that you would say is conceptual, that Jesus rose from the dead. They, like the disciples, had reason to think that based on empirical things that could be verified. For example, that they saw Jesus and were able to verify over and over again that he lived and was able to do things that living people do. So this thing that you say doesn't have an empirical basis, a resurrection, it is therefore, on your view, a conceptual claim, but it was a conceptual claim that had at least some empirical basis behind it, based on your definition of empirical, being able to verify through the senses. So that's what I mean by I think we need to look outside these strict categories, saying all conceptual claims need only conceptual evidence, and all empirical claims need purely empirical evidence without looking to different areas.
I'm not sure I follow.
Okay, that's okay.
Let me see if I can clarify. So the Jesus lived, and that was empirical. I can grant that as a human being. And then Jesus died, and that's empirical. We can grant that. But Jesus' resurrection, conceptual. Like, we have no evidence of people raising from the dead or miracles. That's all just essentially stuff in our head, as far as I can tell. And then the experience of the disciples, or the experience the disciples had of Jesus after he died, we know that happens in humans all the time. It's really common. It's an effect where people see the ones they have loved after they have died as a delusion or an illusion, a misconception, things in their head. That's extremely common. We know of that. And they have very visceral experiences of being able to hear their voice and physically interact with them. But we know that's all in the head. There's no empirical evidence of those people actually coming back. There's no footprints or fingerprints left by those people. There's no physical thing that we can touch there. It's all conceptual as far as we can tell. There's no empirical evidence that those visions occurred in reality outside of these people's heads. And so I would say the same thing, as far as I can tell, would apply to the disciples.
Okay, so this is good. We're kind of back to our main topic here. So your natural explanation for what happened with these events is that the disciples had hallucinations, basically. Is that right?
We have empirical evidence that occurs very commonly, very consistently across all cultures everywhere in the world. So that is a very, very solid basis. Yes.
Do we have conceptual evidence, or evidence in general, that people experience those things on a continuous basis over a long period of time? Or let's say that a group of people experience the same hallucination at the same time?
Yes.
What kind of evidence is there for that?
Well, I can just give you the name Oliver Sacks. He's the one who's done a lot of research on this. I don't have it on hand, but I can email it to you if you're interested after the talk.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that. Thanks for that. So yeah, you see the idea here is that these experiences of Jesus that the disciples had were over a period of time, say several weeks, of seeing Jesus consistently and being able to see signs that he did actually live, which is I don't know if there is a basis for hallucinations of those types of things happening, like say being able to actually touch someone and have that empirical basis to know someone exists. And then there's also indication in an early source in the New Testament that a group of 500 people saw Jesus. So the question is, how could this large group of people have the same hallucination type of experience with Jesus? But yes, if there is some sort of empirical type of data that we have supporting those types of like hallucinations, I would like to see them. So yeah, feel free to send that over.
Sure, I will. We definitely do. They're just called mass hallucinations, but yeah. But we know of lots of examples of lots of people who have claimed to have seen UFOs at the exact same instance, but it's just, here is some event we can't understand or explain. And they're saying, we're going to make up an explanation for that fits our ideology. So even if a large group saw what they claimed to be was Jesus, that isn't evidence that Jesus himself was there. It's just evidence that they perceived Jesus, or perceived someone who looked like Jesus or acted like Jesus in some way, or who reminded them of Jesus in some way. So that isn't evidence that Jesus raised from the dead. Again, because we don't have an empirical basis of miracles, that isn't even a plausible explanation. Until we can actually have some basis for miracles occurring, using miracles as an explanation, even a possible explanation of this, doesn't seem reasonable to me at all. It's just like saying, well, I imagine a unicorn did it, therefore unicorns. Until we actually have empirical evidence of unicorns, that can't ever be an explanation that we go to under any circumstance, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, going back to the hallucinations things, or the idea that people claim to have seen Jesus, that is the events, or that's how I say it, that people claim to have seen Jesus. And that is one of the pieces of data that we need to consider when posing an explanation for all the range of events that
Let
occurred.
me ask you. So, how is the fact that they saw or claimed to have seen Jesus in any way evidence that Jesus was there?
It's eyewitness testimony. It's one of the.
Oh, wait, sorry.
Go ahead.
All right, I'm back. Sorry about that. Had an alarm go off.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. So eyewitness testimony is a primary source of evidence that we use standardly in our lives. Like in a court case, for example, you have an event that in some cases, like cold case kinds of cases, happened 30 years ago. And the only kind of evidence we have for those cases is eyewitness testimony. But it turns out it is a very powerful source of testimony. And if we see that people claim to have seen Jesus a few years after his death, then we needed to think about the question, okay, is it reasonable to think that this happened? So like going to your unicorn example, going back to that, let's say, just if someone says, I saw a unicorn, you may not have a basis to believe them just based on that testimony. But let's say someone saw, or someone said that there was this unicorn, and this unicorn had like all these followers who like were following it around and were learning from the unicorn, and they saw this unicorn die. And that was after this unicorn did like these amazing things, like these really wondrous types of things. And then a few days later, these people happened to see this unicorn again. It was prancing around. They saw it over a series of a month, every day. And then later on, under the belief that this unicorn existed, they went to their deaths under people who disagreed with them regarding this unicorn. Well, looking at all of that information, I think that would at least give us pause to think, okay, we should probably check out this unicorn thing and what's happening there. Even though we do question the empirical implicit basis of that unicorn.
So from that, I would not believe in unicorns based off any of that. I'd be like, okay, provide me with empirical evidence of unicorns. And until you do, I'm not going to believe anything you just said. That just sounds silly to me. Would you believe that unicorns existed based off that testimony?
Not necessarily right away. Again, like all I'm saying here is that it'll give us pause into looking at the claims and to see if there's something behind them. I'm not saying that it proves that it's true. I'm saying it should cause us to look at the information that's there.
Well, I'm always happy to look at any information that's provided, but from my perspective, if it doesn't have an empirical basis, I'm not going to believe in unicorns. If 500 people see a unicorn, I'm not going to believe in unicorns. Like, for example, you brought up the court case analogy. Let's imagine that we have past examples of people being convicted of witchcraft and put to death for witchcraft. And let's say we have 500 eyewitnesses of someone, or of seeing someone cast a spell and like a green light coming out of their wand and killing someone. If you brought that in front of a court case, it would just get thrown out. Like, there's no way there's no precedent for that at all until there is actually empirical evidence of magic or witchcraft that can be verified in the present in front of the judge. There is absolutely no amount of eyewitness testimony of witchcraft or magic that will ever justify a conviction. So as far as I can tell, if it doesn't have an empirical basis, it's just not reasonable to believe based on testimony. It's like a category error. No amount of I saw this is reasonable to believe that that thing exists in the world until you have an empirical evidence of that thing existing in the world.
Right. So I think it'd be good at this point to talk about empirical potential evidence behind miracles, because that's really what we're coming down to, is that you're saying we have no empirical basis whatsoever for this. So no amount of eyewitness testimony will will show that something like that is true. So, for example, we have several accounts of Jesus dying and all those things that I mentioned earlier. But whether you have, let's just say, for example, 4 sources claiming that something like that is true, or 400 sources saying that these things happen, to you, there is no amount of evidence in that sense that would show, let's say, that a resurrection happened. So really this data that we're talking about with evidence supporting the resurrection and that happening, it's really a pointless conversation without talking about an empirical basis behind something like that happening in general. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So from my perspective, no matter how many people say they saw a unicorn, I'm not going to believe in unicorns until they can provide me with empirical evidence. And I would apply the same criteria to miracles. So yeah, if you can show empirical evidence of miracles, then that would definitely make the testimony of a resurrection much more plausible.
Sure. So you asked me about my definition of miracles earlier. Can you provide your definition of miracles, like your understanding of what that would involve?
No idea. I have no idea of what miracles even means. None whatsoever.
Okay. I'm not clear how we can talk about that if you don't have at least some sort of working definition. Because miracle, I mean, you could say that you don't know what a miracle is, or a miracle could be a watermelon for all you know. We need some sort of indication of what it might be.
Well, yeah, you're the one claiming they exist, so you hold the burden of proof to say here's what it is and here's how we know it exists. So I'm just going to go with whatever definition you want.
Okay. You are also making a claim, though. You're saying there is no empirical basis behind miracles. So that is a positive claim in which there should be some sort of definition behind miracles behind it.
In which you would have to actually provide those miracles. I can't provide them. So that's actually not a positive claim. Or I should say it like this. I am aware of no evidence of miracles. I am unaware of what a miracle could be.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a better way to put it. So thanks for saying it in that way. Like basically that there is no reason for you to think that something like a miracle, as I say, exists.
Yeah,
is what you're saying. Yeah, cool. So with that, I just want to look at a few different things, considerations with miracles, and see what you think about them.
Sure.
One thing is that a lot of people have claimed to experience miracles. So what you're saying is there's no basis to believe that miracles happen from your perspective.
As far as I can tell, yeah.
Yep. But a lot of people disagree with that. In America alone, there's been polls that have said a large majority, something like 70, 80% of people believe that miracles happen today. There was a poll or a research study in 2004. It was a Jewish study that showed that 55% of doctors believe that a miracle occurred in their patients. I'm not saying that would hold today or that exact percentage is correct, but even like 20 or 30% of doctors saying something like that, I would see as pretty significant and see as something that we should really try to investigate.
Well, that seems to me to be conceptual evidence, just like the fact that 500 people claim to have seen a unicorn. So that doesn't, again, that's not empirical in any sense. So that wouldn't qualify as evidence to me at all. No amount of, I think miracles exist, because most people used to believe that the sun revolved around the earth. You could pull every human being and they would say is that evidence that the sun actually revolved around the earth? Well, no, you would need actual empirical evidence of that. I can show a picture of an optical illusion to every single human being who has ever lived, and they will all say, yes, this appears to be moving. But that isn't evidence that it's actually moving. You would need empirical evidence of that.
Okay. I want to go back to empirical and dig into that a little bit of what exactly that means. Because empirical, you're saying that something that is empirical is verifiable and repeatable over time. Is that correct?
Sure.
Okay. So in what sense are historical claims empirical? Because they're not repeatable.
they have an implicit empirical basis, like the claim I saw a dog. We can verify dogs in the present, even if we can't verify the specific dog that happened in historical testimony. So they have an implicit basis of empirical nature.
Yeah. Yeah. So that goes back to my point about, let's say, conceptual claims, as you call them, having different types of data involved in them. So I agree with you on that. So there can be different areas we can look at to verify a conceptual claim.
I don't follow you a little bit there, because that's still conceptual and empirical. So we have, if I make a conceptual claim that I saw a dog, the reason that's reasonable to believe is because it has empirical evidence that is implicit to the claim, meaning I haven't stated it in the claim, but it still exists there, because the word dog itself has an empirical basis. We know lots of things that we can empirically verify about dogs right now in the present. So I'm still only using those two. I don't know what you mean by other avenues.
Sure. Yeah, with I'm trying to think of the dog here. So you have the conceptual claim that you saw a dog, and then that's supported by implicit empirical evidence. But you said earlier that conceptual claims require conceptual evidence, but you're using empirical evidence to support the conceptual claim. So I'm not really sure what you meant by that. Conceptual claims require conceptual evidence. Can you expand on that a little bit?
So I saw a dog isn't a conceptual claim. That's an empirical claim. I'm claiming that there is a dog that exists in the world and I happened to see it. So that's an empirical claim, and that would require empirical evidence, which it has, just not explicitly in the statement, because dogs have an empirical basis.
Okay.
A conceptual claim would be like 1 + 1 = 2, A = A. Logical principles like the principle of verifiability, just those are more conceptual claims. Whereas if conceptual evidence would be like, I saw a unicorn. But since that's an empirical claim that the unicorn exists in the world and you saw it, the conceptual evidence of you seeing it isn't sufficient to justify that the unicorn empirically exists. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does. I'm just trying to think back to like the example of miracles now, and using what we just talked about to explain or talk about a miraculous claim. Because someone, when explaining a miracle that occurred, can make empirical claims towards things that have happened.
Would you like me to tell you what I would be satisfied with, to say, if a miracle happened, I would grant that miracles can happen if this occurred, or something like that?
If you want to do that, sure.
So from my perspective, if you want to claim something exists in the world, it needs empirical evidence. So if I can say, I pray to God so-and-so, and every time I do, a gold brick appears in front of me, that would be sufficient evidence for me that a miracle occurred. So if you can use the idea of a miracle to make testable predictions in the future that can be verified via science consistently and reliably, I will grant miracles exist.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense of what you would be expecting. I'm wondering if a miracle or something like it is the kind of thing that is empirical in the way that you're explaining. So, praying to God that a gold brick comes in front of me, is that something that can actually happen in that empirical, testable sense? I don't think people that claim that miracles can occur are saying that's the sort of thing that happens.
Can you go into a little bit more detail? Like, what do you mean?
Like again, it's kind of that category consideration. Like you're saying that you would want miracles to have a strict, let's say, empirical basis, in that something that you said would happen, and then you pray to God, and then that thing happens. That's the only thing that you will accept in terms of proving that a miracle occurred. So I'm saying that miracles are not that sort of thing, aren't this repeatable, testable type of endeavor. So there are other things we need to consider when it comes to a miracle, other types of areas. Maybe it's theology, maybe it's historical claims. It could be different areas like that. There are other things we need to consider to ask ourselves, did a miracle occur beyond this purely empirical kind of data.
Well, if we don't have empirical data, why should we believe they even exist and aren't just something in our imagination? Because can't people who believe in homeopathy or astrology or phrenology say the same thing as well? Well, our hypothesis doesn't really work in the empirical way, so we have to use other criteria to justify that they exist.
Yeah, there is that potential, but again, it's a case by case basis. Like, do those other things that they're saying that has a basis outside of empirical data, do those things have a solid basis behind it? And that really comes down to the theism, atheism kind of consideration. In theism, let's say Christians believe that God is present in the world and has some sort of active, has some sort of action regarding the world and what happens in it. So under that circumstance, miracles are more likely to occur, as opposed to obviously a scenario where the supernatural does not exist and can't affect the system in that sense. So,
sure. Well, if
yeah.
there's a magic unicorn factory that's producing unicorns, then it's more likely that unicorns exist. But you can't start from the perspective of your conclusion. That's circular reasoning, I think. So from my perspective, what methodology are you using to verify miracles? And can this methodology also work for phrenology and astrology and homeopathy and all the things that we know don't work?
Yeah, that's a good question. And that's more of a personal question. So I'll explain, obviously, from my perspective. Miracles, I would say I'm open to the idea of them happening today. I personally would like more of an empirical basis, as you're saying, to show that something did happen the way it did. So basically, things like you might ask for like medical records to show that, let's say, someone didn't have a kidney, for example, and then suddenly does without medical intervention, which is a miracle claim that is out there. So it's something, miracles, that I want to investigate further and see what kind of empirical basis there is behind them. So that's like coming from a personal level. So I don't have.
Well, that would work for me. If someone did not have a kidney and you like prayed over them and then a kidney would magically appear like the next day, that would be pretty good evidence. I would like that. That would work for me.
There are plenty of those claims out there. You may be aware of Keener's work, Miracles, 600, 700-page volume of people making claims like that those different things happened. The wealth of claims of miracles is heavy. There's a lot of them out there. There's thousands upon thousands of miracle claims.
But as far as I know, none of those have ever been verified by any reputable sources ever in the scientific community. They're all, as far as we can tell, fake. Every single one of them.
I question the use of fake there. Like, by saying they're fake, you're saying that people who saw certain things happened were either lying or that there was some sort of amazing natural explanation behind the things that they saw.
Well, they could just be misunderstanding what happened or under a delusion or misconception, like we know most humans are about most things. I mean, that's not at all surprising.
Right. There is that potential. And I believe a lot of cases of miracle claims are those types of things, misunderstandings, things like that. But to say that all thousands upon thousands of miracle claims are that sort of thing is is a pretty bold claim to make, especially in light of people's individual experiences of miracles and the significance that they have in their lives.
Why does the significance that they have in their life has to do with whether or not it's true? Like, people can have illusions of seeing someone who they loved present, and that could be really meaningful to them, but that doesn't mean it's true at all.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean it's true, but it does show the implications of saying that what they experienced was fake or it was a delusion. And that's the case in all circumstances. No matter what thing you experience that makes you believe that something is a miracle, it's fake automatically. Like, I'm concerned that there's no consideration of something like that happening, that we just cut it off automatically.
Oh, you're right that each individual example would hold the burden of proof to show that whatever they claimed actually did occur. And as far as I can tell, none of them have ever met that burden of proof, meaning they're likely just delusions or illusions or something like that, as far as I can tell. No one has brought a case before me that I can say, yes, this has met the burden of proof to whatever you claimed to have occurred actually occurred.
Okay, can you explain what you mean by burden of proof? You might have explained it before, I don't recall, but just to make that clear, regarding miracle claims, what would be a burden of proof for that?
It would depend on the claim, because whatever the claim is, it's going to have a burden of proof that mirrors whatever you're claiming occurred. So it would depend on the claim. But essentially, it's just the empirical verifiability thing. If you have an empirical verifiable claim, then that would meet the burden of proof as far as I'm concerned.
Right. And I'm trying to understand what you mean by empirical verifiable, because someone, like I said, could claim that they don't have a kidney and now they do. Would empirical data mean backing that up with medical evidence that can be viewed afterward by numerous people? Like, or is there something else
It would have
that
to
would
be
require that?
under a controlled study of a group of impartial scientists to make sure that no one was lying or cheating or messing with the data in any way. It would have to be very rigorous to make sure that this actually happened.
Do you think that is a fair criteria? Because a lot of these miracle cases are people going into the emergency room, something crazy happens in their lives. There's not necessarily time to have a research foundation establish a group of impartial scientists to sit there in the emergency room and witness these things happening. Do you think that's really a fair burden of proof to have in terms of someone claiming that a miracle occurred?
Yes.
Okay.
If you just claiming that you experienced some really miraculous thing that no one can verify and we can't really check in any way to make sure it actually happened, I mean, there's no difference from just saying, I saw a unicorn yesterday, but sorry, you can't see it either. Should I believe unicorns exist because someone claimed to have seen a unicorn? Like, no. You have to actually bring me a meaningful way to verify the unicorn existed. I'm not just going to believe you based on testimony that's easily wrong. So yeah,
that makes sense.
What? Go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead. No, you can finish your point.
No, I'm done. I'm done. Go ahead.
Or if you, unless you lost it, which I do all the time. Okay, so yeah, I think I'm understanding what you're saying with the unicorn, and I agree with you about that you wouldn't necessarily believe that person by testimony alone, but you might want to consider a case-by-case basis for that sort of thing too. And I'm not going to go into an in-depth example of the unicorn, but I will go to the miracles again. So again, if someone would say that they didn't have a kidney and then suddenly did have one and have medical records to back that up, would you say that is enough? Or do you need that team of scientists making sure that all the controls are in place and all that in order for a miracle to be possible to you or verified?
It would seem far more likely that...
The question, are medical records enough, or do you need this team of scientists to be there?
No, you need the team of scientists because the medical records can easily be falsified.
Okay.
So, and that's a very, very common thing. So that's a really easy explanation to go to. And so the only way to make sure that didn't happen is you need that team of scientists that are impartial and who you can reliably believe are not going to falsify the data to actually verify this. And then other scientists can take this data and say, well, let's do the same thing and make sure that they're right and test it and get the same results. And then there you go. That's a reasonable way to believe that the miracle occurred.
Right. But what if a miracle isn't the sort of thing, this is what I was saying before, that is repeatable? Like, you let's say you touch someone on the belly button and that person is healed of cancer. Well, maybe the next time you touch someone on the belly button, that won't happen. Just as some crazy hypothetical example. Like maybe miracles aren't that sort of repeatable thing. So can you really set them up in a way where they can be verified through taking the same action over and over again and seeing the same results?
Well, it seems to me that anybody can make up something like leprechauns and say leprechauns just aren't an empirically verifiable thing. They only happen in these certain instances that are seemingly random. I mean, anybody can just make up things and claim that they aren't repeatable. So the fact that they're repeatable and empirical is why we have reason to believe they exist. And so if it's not empirical and repeatable, it's probably just something in their heads, as far as we can tell. Unless
Yeah,
there's some other criteria that you can use that can differentiate between things that actually exist and stuff in our heads, which I don't know about.
I understand your desire for empirical data, coming from someone who is skeptical a lot of times myself. I get that. And that's why I say I want to look more into these miracle claims and see if there is some sort of documentation backing them up. And that'll be maybe my main focus and study kind of going forward. But now I lost my point again. With the sorry, what were you saying again? I want to make sure I'm back on track. What did you just say?
I don't remember exactly.
Okay, that's fine. So what I'm saying when it comes to a miracle is that if someone claims that something extraordinary happened, let's say they have some sort of internal, or they don't have an internal organ, and now they do, and that is verified. The before is verified, through medical records, let's say, and the after is verified in medical records, and there's a doctor there through the whole time. I think that would give us reason to believe that something kind of crazy happened in significance in that circumstance.
Do you think it's more likely that a miracle happened, or that the doctor was just a liar and just made it up to make it confirm his beliefs and be famous? Which is more likely in that case?
It would definitely be case by case. I mean, that's the same with any claim, like the claim with the dog. There's other considerations we can consider with the dog. Instead of just accepting it blindly, we'd have to ask, is the person that is saying that he saw a dog trustworthy? Is there anything else going on with the dog story that makes it seem weird or not believable? So that's the case with the doctor, let's say. Is the doctor someone who is trustworthy? Would there be reason for that doctor to totally make that up and then somehow deceive the family into thinking that things happen, which really didn't? And then that expanding out to all miracle claims, that this lying happened in basically all the thousands of miracle claims that happened around the world. Again, it's kind of a conspiracy kind of situation in that sense, that you're denying the trustworthiness of a lot of people making these claims that this event happened and this event happened, and we need to explain that somehow. What you're saying is it's more likely that they're just lying about the whole thing.
Well, not lying, just misunderstanding, delusional, illusional. Just not. It didn't actually occur. It's just something in their heads, but not necessarily a deliberate lie. But yeah. So as far as I can tell, if a doctor, or let's say somebody said they can jump 1,000 feet into the air, but they only did it one time. Mm-hmm. I mean, I wouldn't believe them. I don't care if they're a professional basketball player or a professional gymnast or an Olympist, or I don't care if they're completely 100% trustworthy and they've never told a lie in their life. If we don't have an empirical basis for that happening, it's not reasonable to believe until there's an empirical basis. So I don't care how trustworthy the doctor is. If the doctor said that this person regrew a liver, until we have an empirical basis of those kinds of things happening, it's not reasonable to believe. Until we can do it in a controlled study with lots of scientists there to make sure and verify that it actually did occur, and other scientists can verify it, it's just a story. Every human being suffers from delusions and misconceptions, and there's absolutely zero credibility to any of that until it has an empirical basis. It's like I can show every human being a picture of an optical illusion. They will all see it moving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you're saying like something like that sort of delusion is happening in these miracle claims pretty much predominantly. Like all miracle claims have this sort of thing happening, or deception of some sort. Is that right?
Well, I don't even need to explain it. I can just say until they come forward with empirical evidence, there's no reason to believe anything they said. Just like there's no reason to believe that when they say the optical illusion is moving, that it's actually moving. Everything starts off as this is something in your head, and until you provide empirical evidence, it's just something in your head, and that's just true of all humans always.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for your comments on all of that, the miracles. I think we had a really good discussion. We're running out of time now. I need to go pretty soon.
All right.
So I think it'd be good to close out. I think we could go on this miracle thing for a long time, which is awesome. There's just a lot to talk about there, and I really, again, appreciate talking about that with you.
Sure. Do you want to go ahead and just issue your closing statement? That was mine already, so.
Okay, sure, that sounds good. When it comes to the resurrection and did Jesus rise from the dead, we need to look at the certain events that can be verified in some sense in history of Jesus living, his death, his people seeing him, or at least claiming to after his death, and then his early followers dying for what they believed about what they saw. And that needs to be explained somehow, those historical facts. To me, the best explanation is the standard explanation that Jesus rose from the dead. There are certainly natural explanations that can be brought up to explain those things, such as hallucinations, but there are problems with them, even from an empirical standpoint. When it comes to miracles, there is kind of a similar way we can approach them, similar to the events of Jesus. We can look at, okay, what happened before this miracle claim happened? What was someone's condition? What was their condition after this miracle events supposedly happened? And let's look at that data and see, are those things true? Did those things actually happen? And if so, those events require an explanation. And to say that all cases where something extraordinary happened in a medical sense are either deceptions or are lies to some extent, I think is a pretty bold claim to make in light of all of the reckless claims that are out there. This is an area that I would like to explore more myself, kind of looking at more of the empirical side of it. But I think there is that question of why are there so many testimonies of miracles out there? And does that tell us that maybe they're a little more commonplace than our experience makes us think? So I'll close with that. And again, thank you, Tom, for the great conversation. Hopefully we can continue to have some more.
Yeah, thanks for your time. I'll send you an email.
All right, sounds good.
See you.
Yep, thanks. Bye.